Hey everyone, it's Mark with Mark's Virtual Real Estate Channel, and we're back with another Upland video. And as many of you know who follow me or Upland, I did a video a couple of weeks ago now. I'm talking about Upland, why I wasn't putting more money into the game, and Upland did a reaction video. So I just want to say it's really cool to see Upland do that. It was fun to watch the video. I went through almost all of it. It was a very long video, so I could have missed a few things, but I tried to hit the highlights and what they're talking about and ignore my video, which I'd already made. So I want to do another reaction to the reaction video, talking about some of the points they made. They made some good points, but I also think they missed some things. And I want to bring some numbers into this as well. So I did some research, got some data together, showing the city releases and some of the minting values and number of properties, which I think is pretty eye-opening, because I don't know if Upland touched on that part as much as I would have hoped they would. They went into a ton of detail on so many things, which was great. But the one part, the most important thing to me is the kind of the city releases. That's the most fun. That's what got me hooked on Upland and really got me excited about everything. And I think they didn't really cover that as much as they could have. So I'd like to bring some numbers into this show, what has happened over time. And maybe they'll do another reaction video, maybe not. But either way, I want to show these numbers and then touch on a few other things as well. So here's their video, and I won't go through this whole thing. This won't be a crazy long video, at least I hope not. But I just want to touch on a couple of their points, not everything. So this is kind of the start of their video. So thank you for doing this, by the way, Upland. And I knew they'd watch some of my videos, but I had no idea they were going to do something like this. That's pretty cool.
Thought, hey, this is a great opportunity to do something new. This is a little bit of a reaction video, a response video, if you were. This is Mark Ferguson, and Mark Ferguson is an Uplander. His YouTube channel is Mark Ferguson's Virtual Real Estate Experience, and it is a fantastic YouTube channel. If you haven't yet, make sure you go over to his YouTube channel. How many times am I say YouTube channel?
First, I'd like to thank how much they promoted me, because they promoted me like crazy on this. So thank you for doing that. But we won't go too much into that. What I want to get to, and it might take me a second to find this, and I'll cut out this part.
Assets and stuff like that. And if you think about it, we're just really at the beginning of this factory. We've just got the system in place now for Meta Ventures to go more smoothly. And as that improves, we've yet to become super proficient with it, with scaling it, but we're getting there. And once that scales, the value of Spark the value and importance of Spark to the economy, it's going to be unquestionable in my mind. The other thing is there's some things that I wish we could talk about right now, but we just can't. But there's some big things that we're working on with Spark. And when we announce those things, come back to this video and be like, that's what he was talking about. Because there's some big...
So it's nice that they talk about there's big things coming to Upland and Spark will be utilized more. I wish we knew what those things were, or had some idea of what it is, because that was one of my complaints. That I've paid quite a bit for Spark. We use it to build buildings, but there isn't a ton of utilization for those buildings yet. There's some, but not a lot. Not like in a real life real estate world, which is kind of why I joined Upland. I want to talk about that too, why I joined Upland and how I got into this game. Because I'm not a gamer. I'm a real estate investor, real estate broker, and online kind of. I have online businesses too, and brick and mortar businesses. This is pretty much the only game I play on the computer. So I want to talk about how I got into it. But hopefully we get some, cool stuff to do with our Spark. But right now it's okay as far as, you can have a shop in it, but you only need one building for a shop. And I did get my shop approved, which they talked about in this video too. And I want to do a video on how much money my shop is making and if that's worth doing as well here pretty soon. So stay tuned for that. But I want to talk about something they mentioned here that I have a different opinion on as far as what Upland is and what Upland has become.
Through enabling you to create value for yourself and others through community, entrepreneurship, layer 2 development, whatever it is that you're into. He did mention rent here. If players could rent, rent is something that is on our roadmap, has been. I've listened to discussions on rent, how would rent work, stuff like that. So it is something that's on our roadmap. It's just, it hasn't unfortunately hit priority yet. And the reason for that is because he underscores a common critique that we get, like, the foundation of Upland is property. Yes, it absolutely is. It always will be. everything we do does have tie into property and location and real estate. Everything we do, whether it's Meta Ventures, cafes are coming, they tie into that as well. But there is this complaint, like, why isn't Upland building up this, this property foundation and building upon it? And it's because we had to make, he mentions Upland Kingdoms there. We had to make we're a small team, we're a small startup team. We had to make a strategic decision. And that strategic decision for us was, do we focus on building up these things, or do we focus on this technology to bring on layer 2 projects? And we made the strategic calculation to focus on building up the technology to bring on these layer 2 projects, so that you could have an Upland Kingdom, so that you could have an Uplandia, so that you could have an Upix Park Exchange. And I think that that's the correct strategy, and I think it's going to play out. That is the correct strategy long term, because now, instead of the value of your property and the utility of your property and everything just being dependent on us, one small development startup team, all of a sudden you have all these layer 2 projects that can come in, and these third-party developers that can come in, and we'll have 100 Upland Kingdoms. We'll have 100 Uplandias. We'll have 100 Upix Spark Exchange. And each one of those will utilize properties and real estate and location in it.
Okay, a lot more said about layer 2, and basically layer 2 is like Kingdoms. If you guys aren't familiar with this, Upland is the main game, and then Kingdoms is kind of a game that piggybacks on Upland, so it allows you to use properties in Upland, sell stuff for Upix. It's pretty cool, and it's not part of Upland, it's just kind of tied to Upland, and so they're talking about having all kinds of different applications and games that can do that. And he later talks about how there could be thousands of layer 2 programs coming on, and that stressed me out. It's like, holy cow. And the reason that stressed me out a little bit is because I want to talk about how I got into Upland. I'm a real estate investor. I don't have tons of time to be online playing games. I want to have something I can do, relax, maybe make a little bit of money on, maybe have some kind of investment into it. But I don't want to be a full-time gamer. I don't want to be someone who has to be on my computer hours and hours a day paying attention to all of this stuff. And so when he said that, it kind of stressed me out. It's like, I don't want to have to learn 100 new games or 1,000 new games. I know you don't have to, but he's kind of saying like that's the draw to Upland isn't in Upland itself, but these other games can piggyback onto it. And I don't want to have to go through all of that or think that I'm missing out or not utilizing Upland because I'm not part of all this other stuff. And it took a while to learn Upland and how to get into the game. It took a little while to get into Kingdoms and how to learn to do it. I don't want to have to do that 100 times. Maybe there's some cool stuff coming, and that's great, but I don't think he's saying that was what they focused on instead of making Upland better as far as properties and rents and that part of it. And so I want Upland to be as good as it can be, and now that this layer 2 technology is here, let the other layer 2 programmers and stuff do their thing. Now let's get back to Upland and make it as good as it can be. All right, and I want to mention too how I first got started with Upland. So it was back in the end of 2021 when there's a big craze for virtual real estate again. We kind of have this big ups and, not virtual real estate, for crypto, big ups and downs for crypto. I was looking more into crypto. I had some before, not a lot, but I've invested in Bitcoin and different coins and different stuff. I used to actually do Steam, if you guys remember. I think it's still around, Steam It. It's kind of like a forum type thing where you could make money, and I thought that had a lot of potential, but then it just turned into a bunch of spam. And so that along went with my blog, investformore.com, and my real estate stuff. So I was looking at, I'm like, I know real estate, virtual real estate's becoming this big thing. There's this whole different world, and I'm like, what is the best virtual real estate thing to get involved with? I don't want to get involved in 20 different things and spread out all over. I want to focus on one. And so I researched different places like Superworld, Sand. I can't even remember the big one that got all the news because lots were selling for $30,000, $40,000. There's all this different stuff going on. And then I found Upland. And I was like, well, this is interesting because it has real properties, like the real property lines. You can build on them. It's limited, right? That's something they bring up in this video too that we'll talk about here in a second. It's not every single property in the world for sale, kind of like Superworld is. That's pretty crazy. So I got drawn to it. I got into it. I got sucked into it. And Upland later on in this video, I won't play the whole thing, says, we're like a television. Upland's a television, and we have lots of different channels for people to watch if they want to watch. If you want to do cars, if you want to do FIFA, if you want to do something else, we don't want to just be focused on one thing in real estate properties. We want to bring all kinds of different things for different people who are interested in different subjects. And I have a different viewpoint on that. I think, again, I didn't start Upland. It's not my position to tell them what to do. This is just my opinion on how it can make Upland better. Upland shouldn't be a TV. Upland should be one of those channels, right? Upland is one of those channels. You have your TV, which is kind of the metaverse or whatever, and you've got different channels you can choose from. Well, Upland, I feel like, was about real estate and properties, and just hopefully you could rent stuff and maybe even modify stuff. You could just be a lot like real life real estate, which I think would be really cool and bring a ton of people like me into it. And a lot of real estate investors tend to have quite a bit of money as well, which could be brought into the game too. And but instead, they say instead of wanting to be one channel, they want to be the whole TV. And that just, I think, losing that focus and trying to be so many things to so many people makes you do a lot of things kind of okay. But I'm a big fan of telling people, do something extremely well. Be the best at what you do. Don't try to do everything okay. If I'm trying to choose someone to work for me or help me or do something, I don't care, if I need a plumber to fix, a house that we're working on, I don't care that you can, work on cars, right? My cars need fixed. That's great that you're a plumber and a mechanic and you can, maybe you're a really good writer. That's great. If you have fun doing that, that's awesome. But for me, I need a really good plumber. So if you're just a mediocre plumber, but you can do 20 other things mediocre as well, I don't care. I want a really, really good plumber. And that's kind of, I'm not saying Upland is doing bad at stuff, but they could be so much better if I think folk was back on the properties themselves. So my whole point here is I joined Upland for the real estate aspect, thought it had so much potential to really do better and better and better. But I think it's almost gone the other direction, and that they've just expanded to so many different things that they've lost focus on real estate. And they kind of even said that too. We only have so many resources, and we decided instead of focusing on rent and doing different stuff, we focus on layer 2 and other things and bringing in more stuff to more people.
So let's talk about city releases here real quick. Mark says, and I agree with him actually. Mark, I hear you. The full city releases, in my mind, are absolutely the most engaging, funnest type of city release that we've done. You've got lots of options. You've got an entire city to explore. What could be a collection? What could not be a collection? You've got multiple price points at that because you've got a whole city, again, to explore. And so ideally, yes, full city releases would, in an ideal world, would definitely be a thing. On the flip side, we do have to manage supply and demand, and it's trying to find, what we're trying to do is find this balance between how do we maximize engagement on a city release versus managing supply and demand. And it's why for a lot of our city releases now, we really look for, is there a strategic partnership that is upcoming on why we should open a city release? How big should this city release be? Stuff like that. So while full city
I just want to touch on this. I did spend a lot of my video talking about city releases and how the Bronx was my first one and one of the most fun ones. We'll show you some stats here too. But he said they want to plan their city releases around strategic partners, and I guess that makes some sense, but I don't see the benefit for us. And I'm not saying, Upland has to do what's good for them. I understand that. But, I don't know. Are they giving money to Upland? Is that what the sponsorship is for? Are they, if we have Sao Paulo because was there some NASCAR thing, South American? I forget. I don't even know what it was. That's how much I care about it. So, I understand you want to have partners and different stuff, but I guess I don't get why that's important. I think it should be based on what the cool cities are, where the most people are located, what gets us excited, not based on it. Well, there's a strategic partner here that we want to, promote and help them out. I think if there's partners that want to come in and help Upland, great. But I don't think that should change, the priority of what's best for players.
releases, while full city releases would be ideal, they also do have an economic effect on the entire ecosystem of Upland. And so it's this balancing act between managing supply and demand, and then having an engaging city release. Because, I mean, city releases, we know Uplanders, city releases are one of the, if not the most engaging activity, for sure. So it's just finding that sweet balance. Now, having said that, we're always looking for ways to make city releases more exciting. We actually had a feedback post over on Reddit where we asked players to leave their suggestions on, hey, what kind of mechanics do you want to see in city releases? How would you like to see it done? And there were some really interesting ideas there submitted that we're looking into and that we're looking at exploring there. So if you have any ideas, by the way, if you're watching this, you have any ideas, anyone, on how to make city releases, what features you'd like to see come to a city release, a fun mechanic that you'd like to see, let us know. Let us know in the comments below. So I get it, we hear you, but keep in mind we are managing supply and demand. If we could open the whole world tomorrow, we would, but it would destroy the entire ecosystem. So we can't. The other thing I do want to correct is when we do a city opening, it's not about, like, we don't look at it and say, what neighborhood should we open that can make us the most money? It's all about that supply and demand. That is just, it's managing that. That is our number one item when we decide what cities to open, what areas of a city to open. Is it going to be a full city release or a partial city release? But again, having said that, let us know. Any ideas on what type of mechanics, what type of fun mechanics you want to see during a city release? We got a lot of interesting suggestions, like I said, over on Reddit, and we're definitely exploring those. And so you may see some experiments here in the future.
And I don't know, okay. So one of the big points I brought up in my video was that the Bronx had way lower prices. Some of the first city releases had way lower prices, way more properties, and that gave us so much more opportunity to mint things, experiment, do different things. And now the releases are way more expensive per property. And I really wish they would have touched on that aspect. He just did a little bit saying money doesn't drive what they do it. But I pulled up some stats to kind of show us what I'm talking about, to show you the differences in Upland recently versus when I first started. So here is an Excel sheet I made, and hopefully you can see this, but very complicated. So I started with my first release. I didn't go back to do all of them. I got my information from upexland.me, which has some, if you click on statistics here, you can pull up full city information, which is really cool. So I don't have a membership to them. Maybe they should give me one for mentioning them all the time. But anyway, you can pull up Bronx and you can see there's 80,000 properties. They're all minted. There's 60,000 owned for sale. I think this is kind of weird how they do this. I think this is the total properties minus properties not for sale plus properties for sale. So I don't know why they say it's owned, but then take off the properties for sale. They're still owned. Anyway, small. Here's the data I really liked, was they showed the transactions from when the city was first released till now. And so you can come on here. It might be kind of small if you're on a screen, but we can see from 12/13/21 to 12/20/21 for this week, there was 88,000 transactions, 75,000 minted properties. This was obviously during the release. Swaps. And spent on minting 1,063,938,192 UPEX was spent on minting. So we can see how many properties were minted in the first week and how much was spent on it. So I took that data to figure out what the average mint prices were in the cities in the first week. I didn't have the data for the whole city and all that, but I thought this gave us a really good idea of what was happening in those releases and how they went and how much UPEX was spent. And it might be surprising because I talked about in my video how LA was kind of, really expensive. It didn't mint out. Maybe it was a mistake. I might have been completely wrong on that because looking at the data, it is crazy what happened in LA. And I think there were some mistakes made, but it kind of shows the potential and how much Upland could be doing in these city releases if just a few tweaks were made. So I sorted these by dates, going through the Bronx, Berkeley. Berkeley was an add-on to Oakland, but it's kind of a new release. LA, Detroit, Queens, Las Vegas, all the way down to Berlin. I did not include secondary releases. I didn't include Rio 2, 3, 4, just the initial ones because I didn't have time to go through a crazy amount of statistics. So what you can see here is Bronx was my first one. There were 75,000 properties minted in the first week, over $1 billion in UPX spent, average mint price 14,000 UPX. So I feel like the Bronx was minted out like crazy. Everyone was excited. You had a really good opportunity to sell properties and make money right away. It was tons of fun for me. It wasn't a massive release, but it was a pretty decently sized release. And then we had Berkeley, which was much smaller, more expensive, but it was kind of like a secondary release, an add-on to Oakland, but still its own city. It was kind of weird because the collections were different too. If you remember, I had a lot of things on how one street stopped being a collection in Berkeley, so it wasn't quite all one city. And then LA came along, and LA was crazy. But look at these stats, 179,000 minted properties. This is just the first week. There's like 600,000 properties in LA or something crazy. 5 billion UPX spent on those properties. Average mint price 29,000. So the price definitely increased significantly, especially considering how many more properties there were. So much UPX was spent there. And there's a lot of discussions about, well, LA was a huge mistake. They priced things too high. There's too many properties. I think all those are valid. But even having said that, it was by far the most successful release as far as UPX spent, by far, if that's the goal, and getting people to transact. And thinking back to LA in my own experience, I did buy some properties that didn't sell right away, or minted some properties. But I also made a lot of money in LA because I was strategic on roads. There's so many different properties to choose from. There's lots of different opportunities to make money because there are so many properties and so much going on. And I think that was fun. So in an ideal world, I think a lot of us think LA is not a great release. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe LA was a great release and there was a ton of opportunity there. You don't have to pick and choose where you want to be, how much money you want to spend. We went to Detroit. Only 8,000 average mint for Detroit. That was one of my funnest releases too. I bought a lot of properties, made a whole lot of UPX selling. There's lots of streets to choose from, lots of neighborhoods to choose from. That was a ton of fun for me. Queens had, and look at the amount of properties here too, 126,000, 153,000. That's just minted the first week. That's not total properties. Over $1 billion UPX spent, over $2 billion spent in Queens. Average mint 13,000. I had a ton of fun in Queens as well, even though I didn't get a lot of the properties I wanted to. It was still a good release for me. And Vegas came along, and Vegas was kind of a dud for a lot of people, I feel like. It was the first of the very small releases, I think. Bronx was kind of small, but Vegas was smaller. Not very many neighborhoods. I think that's a big mistake. When you just have big, giant neighborhoods, there's not as much potential to make much money there because the supply and demand, which they talked about here before. Over $1 billion spent though, but look at this price. Almost as expensive as LA. They brought the prices way up in Vegas again. Then we had Rio, which brought the prices way down again. So it's kind of like, well, they try to push the prices, get pushed back, lower prices again. Who knows? But Rio was again pretty small. And then they had 3 more releases. Think about if Rio had all been released at once and you had all kinds of different collections to go for and different things. I think that would have been an amazing release. They could have had a lot more sales, I think, had they done it all at once, but that's just my opinion. At Porto, which is a little more expensive, but still not crazy. I had fun in Porto, but very, very small. Very small. I think Porto had a second release too, right? But again, it would have been cool to just do it all once, in my opinion. Then we had Dallas, which only had 13,000 properties minted. By far the smallest first week release. And look at the price, 35,000. They really tried to push prices in Dallas. And there's still a bunch of unminted properties there. That one neighborhood was huge and just crazy prices. So Highland Park or something, I can't remember exactly. So again, it's like they kind of pushed the prices. Then they went to Buenos Aires, which had lower prices again. Very few properties again. Not much UPX spent there. And did they have a second release in Buenos Aires? I can't remember. But I had fun in Buenos Aires too, but it's just so small and tiny. A lot of people just got locked out and couldn't buy that much. We had Sao Paulo, again, low price, but not exciting at all. It's so small, so few neighborhoods, no real exciting streets or landmarks, really. So I get the low price, but also wasn't very exciting and so few properties. We had London, which had 2 releases. This is just the first one. Look at London, 19,000 minted properties, 1.4 billion spent, 75,000 average mint. 75,000, over double Dallas, which was the most expensive to that point. Really, really expensive. There were some areas I got lucky in where I minted, which were cheaper, but they really pushed the envelope there. Then the second release, I think, was just as expensive or more expensive, maybe, and left quite a few unminted properties. And it was tough to sell stuff in neighborhoods where I minted that were collections. That became a collection. It was tough to sell stuff I'd minted there just because prices were so high. Then we had Berlin, another small one, slightly lower prices, but still pretty high relative to the old releases. Not much UPX spent. So if you look at this data and stats, I mean, you're seeing the most UPX, kind of the most successful releases was LA, which was just massive and had so many different opportunities. And I think, people do things a little different based on what we know about LA now, but still it's very successful. The most properties. Detroit was tons of fun for me. Bronx was tons of fun for me. Queens was tons of fun for me. All of those had full releases, hundreds of thousands of properties, and relatively low prices. We thought LA was crazy expensive. Well, looking at this now and recently, it's not even that expensive compared to London, Dallas, and LA should be expensive, right? If we look at the world, if we're trying to model real estate after the world, LA should be very expensive based on real life prices. London should be very expensive too, but I don't think it should be as expensive as it was. Dallas should not be that expensive. Buenos Aires, Sao Paulo, I don't really know about prices down there, honestly. Berlin shouldn't be that expensive either. I don't think real estate in Germany isn't crazy expensive. Las Vegas shouldn't have been that expensive. Queens and the Bronx honestly should have been way more expensive being in New York, but so it's not like they're really basing it on real life. I don't know how they base their prices. I don't know how they come up with this stuff. Berkeley should have been crazy expensive if we're basing it on real life. So I don't think they're basing it on real life. So looking at that from a standpoint, the big releases with low prices, to me, are the most fun and create the most speculation, the most UPX spent, and gives people the most opportunity to make money. And that brings on to something they talk about supply and demand and how they have to be so careful. Look how many properties we're selling before. And I'm not saying open up the whole world and go crazy. But look how many properties we're selling and how much UPX was spent. There was massive demand because it was so much fun and there was so much opportunity, so many different things to do. And you knew you had a lot of opportunities. But with these smaller releases, even some of these weren't minting out, being as small as they were because prices were so high. And there wasn't as much opportunity for us to make money. And this is a point I hope they listen to as well. If the players are able to make a lot of money on their releases, that gives them UPX in their account to spend on new releases and keep this going, right? Keep this snowball rolling where you can do new releases and have UPX to spend and keep the excitement going, the speculation going, the secondary market going, and keep the economy going very well. Whereas if we're buying lots of properties in Dallas and can't sell any of them, all our money's tied up in Dallas, we don't have much to spend on a new city. And I don't know, I'm not saying Upland does this on purpose, but then some people are forced to choose, okay, do I just not participate in new releases because I don't have much money, or do I buy UPX? And I'm hoping that's not the decisions they're trying to make people to make. But I think with people doing really well on cities and being able to make this money, it also encourages them to say, hey, if I am low on UPX before a new city release, if I do want to make a splash and buy a lot of properties because I know I can make money on it, I'm more willing to put money into the game, spend money on UPX, and build up my account before then. If I don't think I'm going to make money, if I think it's going to be a struggle, if I don't think I'm going to be able to buy that many properties because there's so few of them, I'm not going to buy UPX and put it into the game. So that's my take on the whole city release thing. And I want to pull some data in to show people what I think was the most fun and back it with some stats. And hopefully they'll respond to this and tell us what their theory is and their idea is behind the pricing and how many properties. They say supply and demand, but they're still doing, 4 or 5 releases on some of these cities. So it still has a lot of properties. It's just they're not doing it all at once. So we can go back to, and this video is taking longer than I planned, sorry. But we can go back to some of these statistics on Rio, which had a tremendous amount of releases. Again, the Rio prices were affordable, which I thought was great. But still, 129,000 total properties and 4 releases. So they have less total properties in all of Rio than were minted in the first week in Queens, LA. Detroit was close. And those were fun releases. I don't think those releases destroyed the market by any means. I don't even think the LA release destroyed the market. If you can see how much money is spent here, and people still love LA. There's tons of nodes in LA. They're doing fantastic. Kingdoms is doing great in LA. The most fun cities to me are these cities that have the properties and the opportunity and lower prices. So that's my take on the whole cities thing, on the releases. And I hope they consider that for the next releases, because these short partial releases just aren't much fun for me. Yeah, so that's about all I wanted to cover in this. I really do need to get back to work again too. I'll have more videos coming up, especially on my shop, how it's doing. We'll have more contests for the lazy nodes. We have a Discord channel. We're lots of great people talking about Upland and different stuff. If you guys want to join that, the description's below. Love to hear what you think of this video. If you think I'm off base, no worries. I've got thick skin. I'm a real estate investor who's got an online social media presence, so I'm used to people yelling at me all the time. So don't worry, you can leave comments, good or bad. And love seeing new subscribers too. We've had a lot of subscribers lately, so appreciate that. Thank you again to Upland for doing this reaction video. I appreciate the insights and you taking the time to do this and being very professional as well. And telling people to come to my page is awesome. So thank you. Be back soon. Love to hear what you think on all this.